Hello and welcome back. Chapter 31 is an introduction to breathing. We will talk about breathing organs and what happens when we breathe. So take a deep breath and let's hop right in. When we breathe, we exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. We saw with cellular respiration, we use oxygen to oxidize glucose to produce ATP, and carbon dioxide is one of the waste products of this process. Carbon dioxide must be eliminated from the body. If left in the body, it will lower the pH of body fluids, most especially blood. The pathway of oxygen from the air to the mitochondria involves crossing through epithelial tissues at several points, which are relatively short distances. The path of oxygen also includes crossing longer distances, such as from the lungs to a muscle cell via blood. Most of us are familiar with the long paths that oxygen takes as it travels from the lungs and through our blood to organs and tissues. Short paths of oxygen are when it travels through epithelial tissues, such as when it passes through the alveoli in our lungs into the blood. Oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged by diffusion along their concentration gradients. Partial pressure is the portion of the total pressure exerted by a gas in a mixture of gases. A gas will always diffuse from where its partial pressure is high to where its partial pressure is lower. Diffusion is effective for moving gases over short distances, such as through membranes or epithelial tissues. 0.55 millimeters is the maximum thickness where oxygen can diffuse fast enough to meet metabolic needs. Thus, bulk flow, such as flow of air into and out of our lungs, is necessary. Animals use both diffusion and bulk flow to meet their metabolic needs. Here is the picture from a few slides back, illustrating both bulk flow and diffusion of oxygen. Bulk flow occurs in oxygen traveling to the lungs and through the circulatory system. Diffusion occurs as the oxygen leaves the blood and goes into tissues, such as muscles. Gas exchange membranes are thin layers of tissues where respiratory gases move between the environment and internal tissues. Breathing, also referred to as external expiration, is a process by which oxygen and carbon dioxide are transported between the environment and the gas exchange membrane. Breathing occurs by ventilation, which is the bulk flow of air. There are two common types of breathing organs that animals may have. Lungs, which you're familiar with, are invaginated, folded inward in your body. They contain the environmental medium, which is air. Gills, found in aquatic organisms, are folded outward from their body and surrounded by the environmental medium, which in their case is water. Tidal flow is when air moves in and out within the same passageways, like a wave moving back and forth. Animals with gills usually have unidirectional flow with water moving in one direction across the gills. You can see a diagram of gills on the top. They are folded away from the body and surrounded by water to receive oxygen. Lungs are illustrated on the bottom. They are invaginated and folded into the body, unlike the gills. Also, lungs contain the medium with the oxygen. Diffusion occurs much faster in air than it does in water. Sea turtles lay eggs in the sand. If the sand is dry, they get plenty of oxygen through diffusion. But if the sand becomes wet, partial pressure of oxygen falls, thus preventing oxygen from diffusing, and the eggs can die. Okay, here's our first progress check. When answering this question, think about the amount of distance that oxygen must travel to reach its intended area. Once you're done answering this question, move on with the rest of the lecture when ready. Breathing organs have large surface areas for gas exchange. The surface area is increased by complex patterns of tissues folding and branching. For instance, in humans, we have about 130 square meters area of gas exchange within our lungs. In humans, our ventilation is added by muscles in the abdomen and thorax to expand the lungs when we inhale and to contract our lungs when we exhale. This causes bulk flow of air in and out of our lungs. Breathing organs need a specialized circulatory system. Perfusion is blood flow through capillaries or other small blood vessels of a tissue. Perfusion of gas exchange membranes must be fast enough for the blood to pick up oxygen as fast as delivered by breathing. Most breathing organs have three elements: a ventilation system, a thin gas exchange membrane of a large surface area, a high rate of blood perfusion provided by the circulatory system. Systemic tissues are all the tissues other than those of the breathing organ. In the systemic tissues, the blood releases oxygen to the cells and picks up carbon dioxide. The blood returns to the gills or the lungs to load the carbon dioxide to pick up more oxygen. In mammals, air enters the lung through the oral cavity and nasal passage, which joins in the pharynx. Below the pharynx, the esophagus directs food to the stomach, and the trachea leads to the lungs. At the beginning is the larynx, also known as the voice box. The trachea branches into two bronchi, then into bronchioles, which end in alveolar sacs. Here's a diagram of the respiratory system. Air enters through the oral cavity or nasal cavity and travels down to the pharynx, which then will lead down to the trachea, which then eventually goes to the lungs, and then it enters the bronchioles. Within the bronchioles are the alveoli. The air will diffuse across the alveoli and into the capillaries where it will travel through the body. Epithelial tissues. This is where gas exchange occurs. There are about 300 million alveoli in adult lungs, creating an enormous surface area for gas exchange. Conducting airways conduct flowing air in and out of the lungs during inhalation and exhalation. Gas exchange occurs in respiratory airways. Blood and air are separated by only about 0.5 micrometers in alveoli, so gas diffusion is rapid. Tidal volume is the amount of air that moves in and out of the lungs per breath. Respiratory minute volume is the total volume of air inhaled and exhaled per minute. During exercise, people increase tidal volume in breaths per minute and thus increase respiratory minute volume. Our lungs and airways are never completely empty. The residual volume is the air that cannot be expelled from the lungs. This stale air is low in oxygen. Each inhalation brings a mixture of outside air and stale air to the exchange area. Mammalian lungs are suspended inside a thoracic cavity. The diaphragm is a sheet of muscles at the bottom of the cavity. Contraction of the diaphragm expands the thoracic cavity, which pulls on the lungs and expands them. Air is sucked in. Breathing is also aided by intercostal muscles, which are found between the ribs. On the left, you can see inhalation with the lungs expanding with the diaphragm contracting. On the right, you see that during exhalation, the lungs contract, while the diaphragm relaxes. Exhalation is where the diaphragm and intercostal muscles relax. This allows the lungs and thoracic cavity to push air out. During exercise, additional breathing muscles are used and increase the force of inhalation and exhalation. Now time for our last concept with breathing. Breathing is under negative feedback control by the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood. In the blood, carbon dioxide forms carbonic acid, as shown in the equation below. Carbonic acid can lower your blood's pH. If partial pressure of carbon dioxide increases, the concentration of hydrogen ions also increase, thus lowering pH. This is detected by neural centers within our medulla oblongata. Breathing is stimulated to increase respiratory minute volume. Increased ventilation helps get rid of carbon dioxide, returns pH to a normal value. Here's the last progress check for this chapter. Please let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully you can all take a deep breath and rest easy knowing you got through another lecture. Thank you for listening and have a good rest of your day.